Hello, friends, and welcome back to another Dark Towers discussion. We are now on book six, and this time I got it right. Book six, Song of Susannah. And I'm here. I don't have a copy of it this time. I listened to it
Oh
on audiobook. I couldn't. Oh, it's a long story, but
no.
I'm here with friends you guys probably recognized from the last couple of discussions. We've got author Jeff Lane and booktuber Ursi.
Yes.
I'm so glad you guys could join us today. So, we also have Brandy in the chat. Brandy is joining us from there. And I don't know if Joseph is going to jump on later or if he's able to join at all today. So, this
Hopefully.
book. Hopefully, yes. Let's start with our overall feelings about book six. Ursi, we'll start with you.
Okay. So this book was very, very interesting. Um I feel like a lot went on in this book, and it was a little like all over the place, but I felt like it answered a lot of the questions that we had like throughout the series. And I feel like he's trying to tie up all these loose ends and connecting the dots, and it's still a little confusing. Like I remember like even though I have the book, like I was still listening to it at the same time, and I felt like that was helpful, but I also found myself having to go back a little bit sometimes to be like, wait, all of a sudden there's an ambush, like what's going on? Like there was just like a lot going on, but it was still fun. Like I felt like the vibe was a little different, but I still liked it, not as much as some of the other books. um I will say that, but I thought it was a fun ride. I felt like we have a lot of questions answered about the tower and this multiverse kind of thing going on, and and that's part of it that I enjoyed a lot. What about you guys?
Well, Jeff, what do you think?
Reread. I'm trying to separate out what I think were my initial reactions way back when versus my reactions now. Book six is the hard to pin down in terms of what happened. I'm always 6 and 7 kind of blend to me. It's kind of all much to the end. So it's always good to read book six, try to pin down. All right, yes. And the biggest thing for me is the introduction of a certain character, which I remember at the time on the character, but are we doing spoilers?
We
Yeah,
can.
Okay. So when the whole plot point of having Stephen King in here and the Stephen King diary at the end, I remember initially reading that thinking, this is either the stupidest thing I've read in a this is so mind-blowingly genius that I couldn't decide which. And I said, and I think it actually resolved my mind. It was a genius move to make. I'm sure it's been done before. I wasn't familiar with this trope in a book of the author actually being in it, and also interacting with his creations. But I love that part of it. My favorite part of it. And now to me, that's the standout. What is, and it's meeting Stephen King. So
Yeah.
I like that. And then there's some great action sequences in it.
Mm-hmm.
Outside the general store, Chip calls it. No, Chip is the store. The guy who takes him to his cabin. I love that whole sequence of it. We get a chance to spend as much time with Pear and Jake over there. I like it.
Yeah. What about you, Stacy?
We'll get there.
I was when time comes.
So I
Brandy
will
says
say
this is a weird one, guys.
So I will say, what made me laugh a lot was, all these connections with Ka, like Ka and Destiny and everything, right? Just a quick side story, just because I thought it was so funny. One of my guilty pleasures, like one of the like the weird shows that I like to watch is Hoarders, right? And my husband, so my husband, he's always like, "You are so weird for liking this show," and I'm like, "I can't help it. I really like it." And he was the day that I was gonna start this book, he's like, "You really should stop watching the show and just start the book." But then in the episode, the guy had like a stack of the Dark Tower books, and I was like, I was meant to watch it. It's Ka. I'm meant to watch it.
And of course, Calvin Tower is a hoarder himself, isn't he?
There you go.
It is Ka.
It was Ka. I was meant to watch it.
Brandy says she still really liked it. I'm curious what really liked means, because she says she loved all the other ones. So
Loves Hoarders.
this was exactly how I felt about Stephen King being in the book too, Jeff. At first, it was so weird, but as I kept reading, I thought it was kind of genius.
Mhm.
Okay, I have to disagree. This book was very slow. There was literally one action scene in the whole thing, and that was outside the journal store. That was the only thing that really saved it from being worse than Gunslingers. And also, I love all the characters. So in Gunslingers, I was like, who is this guy and why am I reading this? But when Stephen King came into it, I was just like, I felt like it was Stephen King's way of explaining why all of his books connected. And I liked the mystery of that. So this ruined it for me. Because it's like, it's all my books are connected because because the thing they have in common is me. And instead of it just being something that I do as an author, I'm going to explain it as, my weird connection to this multiverse. And I was like, it ruined it for me. I just liked the way that he would drop little hints in all of his books. And so I felt like this was his way of trying to connect his overarching narrative in a way. And I didn't care for that. But other than that, I thought it was done. I thought it was cool. I liked how he wrote himself very believable. He didn't try to write himself as something other than we already know him as. If that makes sense. We know him as being, a bit of a drunk around this time, as not being very famous yet, struggling, and so it was very believable. He didn't try to write himself as this hero. But I also like the fact that Roland kind of looks like him. So we know that a lot of authors will write characters in their stories that are either a piece of them or kind of what do you call it? Like you want to imagine yourself as something more. So you write. Yes, wish fulfillment. So I thought that all of that was very cleverly done because it made it more believable. It didn't make it. I didn't feel like, oh God, he's just trying to, write himself into the story. It made sense, but I was disappointed with that one aspect of it, and it kind of ruined things for me a little bit. So that's why I say I disagree. I didn't think it was genius, but I thought if you're gonna do it, he did a good job of it. I would have preferred that he didn't do it. It also made it confusing for me because it's like, okay, so is he just writing about reality or is he creating it? And you're left with a little bit of unknown there because, the fact that Roland or that Eddie's there and he hasn't yet written the drawing of the three that tell us that in King's world, that hasn't happened yet. So therefore, Eddie is real. And I was just like, oh my God, this is one of those things with the Gunslinger. It was very confusing. I felt like I was back in that narrative where it's like, once again, I don't know what's happening. And I felt like this was 400, 500 pages of nothing happening.
It was a lot of tension building. I will say that, especially with like Susannah, Mia, and like you said, with the action with like Roland and them outside the store. But yeah, I definitely feel like it was a lot of tension building with those storylines. And I don't know, I kind of like the slow build kind of thing. Like you're building like what's gonna happen, like who's gonna do what, but I can see it being something that other people would not enjoy and be like, okay, I just want to know what's going to happen, you know, especially with like this tension towards this baby and like the mystery with the baby and like where this baby even came from. But I feel like those areas, like he gave room to build up why those things were happening, and explaining, like I said, like a lot of the stuff that we were questioning before, like with like the baby, right? And where even Mia came from, like even that whole thing, like I think in the last one I was like, oh, it was like out of trauma. No, that theory was out the window. Jeff was like, I don't know.
Good poker face. I didn't expect it at all.
Joseph.
I'm sorry I missed this discussion. I really like the book. I think King does really well in shorter books. Good pacing, and I like the action. And the action was good. It just I read 250 pages before the first action scene. I got tired of all the talking. Suzanne and Mia talking. You get a lot of information out of that, but it's like all of that could have been 100 pages of them having one palaver. But it's like, we're going to have a palaver, and then, you know, we're going to come out, we're going to walk down the street a little ways, and then we're going to have another palaver, and then we're going to go to this hotel, and then we're going to have another palaver, and we're going to go to this Dixie Pig, and in front of the Dixie Pig, we're going to have another. I was just like, oh my God. So, but you did get a lot of information.
Eddie told her to burn up the day. It was almost like Stephen King was burning up the pages. Like,
yes.
Let's just see out. I gotta get at least turn in something that's novel length, but I don't think he was quite ready to take his final steps. That or calm before the storm, straight, you know, before he plunged into the final big ending. I guess when you were talking about does Eddie exist? Does he not exist? The thing that blew my mind this time, I had never thought about before. So they're in the real world, the Keystone world, whatever you want to call it, and George Biondi and all of Salazar's goons are there in the real world. Yet King is going to write about them in a fictional book coming up. So that one kind of blew my mind. Like, so wait, is Stephen King channeling this or whatever he's doing? Is he saying that he's writing about events and people that really are in the real world?
Well, I mean, including. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I didn't get that last part. I'm sorry.
Write them, and they now exist in the real world.
Well, see, that was the thing, because also Eddie was saying there was one part where Eddie asked him, "Where is what was the name of the neighborhood? And was it in Brooklyn or in the Bronx?"
Oh, the apartments. What is it called?
Speaking of Betsy, but I don't think that's right.
Okay, well, everybody's saying it's in the Bronx, but in Eddie's world, it's in Brooklyn. And so he's saying, did Stephen King make an error in his book, and therefore in Eddie's world, it's in Brooklyn? So then it's like, okay, well then did he write Eddie? Or is he, in King's mind, he's so connected with the worlds that he's writing that to him, it really is in Brooklyn, because he's more connected with Eddie's world than he is with the real world. Because has Stephen King ever been to New York? We don't know.
And
so
see,
it's just so confused.
Yeah. Because even as like, because I know, you know, being native New Yorker, right? That's one of the things that people from New York will like clock you on, being like you knowing your geography, and like you getting something messed up, like where it is, people will look at you like, do you know? Like, so I really, that whole thing back and forth was really like, it was kind of funny to me. And he was like, but wait, but it's supposed to be in Brooklyn. Like, I don't understand. Like, that's where I'm from. What are you talking about? And it's like in the Bronx. Like, nobody knows, but because Stephen King doesn't know, you know, but it was just kind of funny to me, that whole little
it's
back
almost
and forth
like he was trying to fix a plot hole.
Yeah.
So Brandy says, I like to get I like that you get the feeling that the Dark Tower series controls Stephen King rather than him controlling it. I bet he really felt that way writing it. I did like that where he says that he kind of goes into this almost like a sleepwalking. I mean, he didn't describe it as that, but that's how I imagined it. Like he wakes up and it's written. And so that was like, okay, so he's channeling the other worlds, but there were other things that were said that made me wonder, is he creating them? And I didn't leave with a definitive, but Stephen King is notorious for that, for leaving it up to his readers to decide, or leaving it to further later on in the story to, give you a definitive answer. But it just confused me more. And then I sometimes I like that mystery, and sometimes it's like, you know what, you answer all these questions and then you gotta leave me with more questions. Like, really?
Aspect of it is he fictionalizing and all of this. Yes, he doesn't. And especially like the journal part at the end. How much of that is fictional and how much of that is real life, or how much that's what kind of gets me. There's a part of my brain that says he really did get this, and he involved and enriched it.
Yeah.
All of this is real. And the part of it is like, but I will say that as a writer, and Joseph, maybe you can chime in on the chat too, but there are times when you do just get in a move, and I think about my stories when I'm not writing, when I'm kind of caught in my heart, thinking about the next step. Then when I write, you do kind of just get into this flow, and it just kind of pours out, and it's not what you planned, and things change, and come up with ideas on the fly. I can see a little bit of that. Was not I don't feel like anything like my belly button, but I do get the trance like
Oh, I think your audio cut out right at the end. I don't know if I heard that last part.
No, I didn't either.
I was just saying, I get the whole like getting in the trance.
Because he even said, I think in the end, right, where he was like, he's getting all these letters from these fans asking like what's going to happen, right? And he's like, I don't know. I really don't know. And like I can see that in his writing, and he's trying to find ways to fill in those gaps while also allowing the story to just kind of flow, like you said. Because you get feelings of both. Like there's some planning, and then there's some like, where did that even come from? But it's very loose in a very connected way. It's so weird. I don't know how I don't know how to explain that,
Yep, same here. So Brandy says, I had a theory in the last meeting we had about Mia that she wasn't just another personality of Detta. Oh, I love the reveal where she really came from. Yeah, I was not expecting that. I really thought she was just another personality. I mean,
did too.
Even Susannah thought that's what was happening. But it makes you wonder if Detta is really just another personality now. So, or if she is somehow.
Yeah, maybe Susannah is just a conduit.
But I really liked Detta here. She really took charge, and I really enjoyed that. And I liked how Mia was afraid of her. I just
she's like, get this bee out of here. What was it? Richard Sayer, when all of them are like coming forth, and he's like, throw her back there. What are you doing? And she's like, I don't know if I can. That was great. That was so fun.
That it was that the baby is partly Roland's.
Oh man!
Oh wow, that was trip. I did not expect. Even when you had that the chapter where she sees the baby on the screen and it's got blue eyes, I must have just skimmed over that, because I remembered her saying he had blue eyes, but it never dawned on me that that didn't make sense because Eddie doesn't have blue eyes. I don't know.
Mhm.
Or does he have blue eyes? I don't know. But it didn't.
Because in the scene in the plane when the stewardess keeps noticing
Oh.
he's changing.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
my question to you guys was, how did you guys envision that room? Like I envisioned that room that she kept going back into, like sort of like a control room, right, with screens and stuff. So I was curious if that was how you guys saw it too, because it was like this room in her head with like her being able to see the the personalities and the baby and the controls, and I thought that was pretty cool. But how did you guys envision that little scene?
The same, like a control room.
Yeah.
Like in a
kind of like a nuclear fallout shelter.
exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
I don't know if I got that. So I think I might have had an illustrated edition that maybe had paintings. I think my version of Wolves has paintings when Jake was,
Oh, okay.
and her version is a bit. She's manufacturing her version of it, and I think some of the technologies from her lab of 1960s technology versus budget stuff. I remember when I watched Lost, I've seen Lost, some of the hatches, the Dharma hatches,
Oh yeah.
they're
Yeah.
the swan main hatch that reminded me of that. But then there's another hatch that has all TV monitors. I think it's the Looking Glass. I think would be. I don't know if that hatch is. There's one of the hatches that has all TV monitors, and you can monitor different places on the island, and it can remind me of that.
Yeah, I remember that in Lost, right? That was pretty cool. I remember that, like, you're seeing all the them watching everybody. Oh, that was like, I remember that.
I have a question,
So
if you would indulge me, Brandon, if you can answer this, but I was excited. I was kind of bummed that Steve failed before the book because I wanted to get just Steve to the part with the Stephen King reveal and those scenes. So I don't know, Brandy, does Steve know about that yet? And if not, if he does, what does he think of it? If not, what do you think he would think of it if he read this?
so while we wait for her to answer, she did say that she thought of that as well about the hatches.
Hmm.
I didn't even think about that. Now that you guys say it, though, totally, I could totally see that.
Lost. Like he was, in fact, I think he was writing a weekly column, weekly at the time, or maybe it was a monthly column. But he loved Lost when it was on. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
They came first, and before everything.
I can
So
see that.
going back to,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say, going back to Roland being the father.
Mhm.
Of course, I didn't see that coming, but what did you think about what that means? How they were saying that he's going to the prophecy, I guess there's some prophecy that he's going to kill his father, and that's the reason why they need the chap or Mordred, if you will.
I know I kept thinking about this scene in Wizard and Glass with him and his mom, right? And it's sort of like a full circle kind of moment where, like, obviously I don't know what's going to happen in the next one, but Jeff knows. but yeah, I just kept thinking about that and hoping that that's not gonna be what it is. Like, it could be like this big moment of like the baby offing him, right? But it could also be like this other side of it of Roland having to, once again, in order to keep the tower together, right, do something to the baby. Or it probably won't even be that. It might be one of the other characters, but I don't know. I don't know, but I just kept thinking about him and his mom. So
It's a good pickup. I don't know if I've ever made that connection about he killed his mom, and his son wants to kill him. That's a good like looking glass
Yeah.
interpretation. I love it. I like it.
Yeah, because I
Or
didn't.
will he end up killing his mom essentially as well? Because we don't know what's going to happen to Susannah. I mean, I guess she's not technically pregnant anymore, right? So the baby's been transferred over to Mia.
But like I was really like that whole scenario, that reveal of like them holding on to his seed,
Yeah,
right, and
weird.
then transferring it. Oh, that was like, it just disturbed me. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense, because the whole time we were just questioning, like, is this going to be a demon baby, and is it still a demon baby? You know. But then even when he was saying, they're all sort of twins of his ka-tet, right? And like Eddie is Cuthbert. And it would make sense that Susannah and Susan, are like these sort of symbiotic twins or whatever. And she was pregnant when she died.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm. And she was going to have his baby. And now Susannah is having his baby. I don't... Links. I'm putting the puzzle together.
So Brandy says, I guess Steve knows she's been telling him everything, and she's so sad that he still says he wouldn't have liked it. He is not as open to weirdness as I am, I guess.
Which is weird, because he reads all these horror stories.
Yeah. I love this series so much. I plan to reread, and I'm not a person who does reread. I will say that even though I didn't really care for the Gunslinger, and not even as I liked Song of Susannah more than the Gunslinger, but even then, I definitely want to circle back and read the Gunslinger again, especially after Song of Susannah, because you get so much more insight into what Stephen King thought about the Gunslinger, right? Especially when he talks about how he thought he was being so clever with it going backwards in time. And I was like, now I want to reread it. But I don't feel like I could just read the Gunslinger and not keep reading. Yeah, because there's so much in this book that reminds me of stuff that I missed in the others. And so now I'm like, that was the one thing that I really liked about Song of Susannah, is it answered questions that I didn't even know I had, because I had missed things. Like I had suspected that the ka-tet was twinned, but I didn't really think it was on purpose. I just thought that we were seeing, or Roland was seeing a likeness in them, because we get his story with Susan, and so we just automatically start to link, similar personalities. But now it's like, oh, that was on purpose. And now I got to go back and read, not the Wasteland. What's the one after the Wastelands?
The Wizard in Glass?
Wizard in Glass again, because that was the first one that I read that I was like, this isn't a 5-star book. And now I'm like, I'm going to go back and really try to see how, Eddie is like Cuthbert, and how Jake is like, I can never remember the other. Elaine. And now that you brought up the fact that Susan was pregnant when she died, so now I got to read that one for sure again. And then there was so much in The Wolves of the Kala that I kind of missed. I was getting bored with that one too. So there was parts where I skimmed until it was an action scene. I was like, all the information that you get, especially about Father Callahan's story, that was like, I really liked his story until like the very last part of it. So when that Sayer guy came in, I was like, why does that sound familiar? And then you find out, and I was like, I still don't remember that. When did Father Callahan jump out of a window? How did I miss that?
Yeah.
So I definitely have to reread these.
On top of the reread, you can really go down a rabbit hole with all these books to it. So you can read Insomnia, you can read The Talisman of Black House, you can read Parts of Atlantis. Like, there's so many like sections that you don't have to read, but when you do read it, you're like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like,
See, my
And I
husband.
didn't read.
Oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say I didn't read Hearts of Atlantis before this, which you had recommended. So I'm curious how those two connected. Have you read Hearts of Atlantis, Ursi?
Mm-mm.
No.
These are the only books from Stephen King that I've read. I mean, I've read Eye of the Dragon like years ago, and then I just kind of fell off of reading for a while because it's like school and stuff and like university, and so yeah, this is like my first time back. Well, not first time, but like as far as like with Stephen King, like even though I have a bunch of Stephen King books, I just haven't read them for a while. And then when you guys were doing the read along, I was like, let me just hop on to read along. Like this is my little brother's favorite series, and he's been telling me for years, like, just read it, it's so good. And I remember putting down The Gunslinger like 3 times because I just could not get into it. But I was also doing like school and stuff, so there's that, right? And yeah, now that I'm like with you guys and like discussing it, like I'm like, okay, I'm in. I'm in. I'm dedicated. I'm gonna read more. And then I was even telling my husband because he's reading it too, but he's about to start Wolves of the Kala, and I was like, well, maybe before you read Wolves of the Kala, you should read Salem's Lot. And he's like, I don't think I want to do that. I think I just want to read. I'm like, no. I think you should read Salem's Lot. I still haven't even read it yet, but I spoiled myself for it. But he's like, all right, I'll try. So yeah, I
It's
have
not really
a weird
spoiled,
journey.
just so you know. You get some of the plot points the Father
Mhm.
Callahan tells you. You're getting it all from his point of view. The book is actually from the point of view of other characters, so you'll still enjoy it if you want to read it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still gonna read it. It's just gonna be like, I know what happens after. Yeah.
So Brandy says, I love that this is Roland's baby. I think that was the biggest. There were so many things that came out of this, though. It wasn't even just Roland's baby either. So I want to talk a little bit more about Roland's baby, but there's one other thing I want to talk about before we leave. Okay, how disappointed were you reading 500 pages and the very last page is just he comes into the world and we don't get to know anything more? I was listening to the audiobook, right? And I had 2 hours left of the book. And I was like, oh, okay, we're going to get some really good stuff here. And then it ends, and it's this diary for another 45 minutes. And then it's the first hour of the Dark Tower, I guess like a sneak peek into it. I was so disappointed. I was like, no, this is not where it ends. This is a trick.
That diary thing was I mean, it was cool to, I think for me, like I liked it because it was like remembering how Roland and Eddie left off with him, right? With the Stephen King in the book, where he kind of like obliterates his memory, right? I was just watching Harry Potter. I'm sorry. Like so like, he wipes his memory so he doesn't really remember, and he's kind of like, what happened? Like, why am I late? And then you have this, I always find like whenever you see somebody like wiping someone's memory, there's always still like a taint or like a little bit of something that's left, right? And I think that's sort of what he was trying to show in that little diary sequence, because he kept coming back to the 19th, June 19th or whatever, right? Which is my birthday, by the way. So yeah, he just kept coming back to like the 19th and things about the tower, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna come back, and I really feel like I have this feeling like I need to write a little more about this. Like, it's just these things sticking in his head. And I think that not only is he like tying his personal experience with the Dark Tower, but sort of giving that extra oomph of like Roland's impression on the Stephen King character from when he left off with them. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of liked it. I dug it.
I had to read that part because the audiobook was horrible, just so you guys know. For that.
Stephen King to do the audio for that part of the audiobook. Like I was, George Friedell's great, but no one can do Stephen King like Stephen King. Like it would have been awesome if he had narrated his own journal.
That would have been good.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Like a more of that meta, like it's real reality. That would have been great.
And I like how
was
Ursi,
hoping he
you
would've-
said.
yeah.
Well,
Sorry,
I was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, I liked how you said that the Stephen King character, because we know based on the journals that he is in fact a character in this story and
Mhm.
not the real Stephen King, because he doesn't live in the accident.
Mhm.
And that we also know that he doesn't finish the books. So if the world is created from Stephen King, then how are we reading about things that happen after he passed away?
It's a different universe. You know what I mean? Like I I thought it was cool, like having that extra little, like you kind of know, but you don't, and things are like influenced. Different universes are influencing another universe, and like I don't know, it's weird, but I like it. I don't know. I like
It is weird because, Father Callahan exists in one universe, but in another universe, he's a character in a book. So, and the author of that book is the Stephen King that we meet, or we're assuming is the Stephen King we meet. Yet we're in a universe where the Stephen King that we're reading has lived, but the one we're reading about supposedly is from the real one, where if he dies, you never come back. So it's like, if he died, then how are we reading these books? I don't know. It was all kinds of crazy, which is why I said I left this book with more questions than I had.
See, but
Brandy
Brandy
says
said it. Yeah.
I love the ending. It made you look forward to jumping into the next one. Are they going to find a Stephen King from another world? Well, how? Because he supposedly died in the real world.
But what did she say? There are other worlds.
Oh, did she say so?
This.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. That's the answer.
I have to say that Stephen King did a brilliant job with this multiverse idea, because he doesn't explain it. So you as a reader can kind of explore it and have discussions like we're having now. We don't know the rules. So, and then when he gives you rules, the rules are only based on what the characters know, and they don't know everything. So that's one of the things about, yes, you feel confused, and at some points it's frustrating. But I can tell you, so my husband's like, why do you keep reading these books? Because I was complaining about Song of Susannah. I was like, well, first of all, out of the last 6, 3 of them were 5-star books. So that's one reason to read it. But I have to know, this may not have been my favorite, but by no means did I leave this book going, I don't care to read the next one. I have to know what happens. I don't know how Steve did it.
I totally feel you there, because now I was going back and forth with like I finished this one and I was like, I'm just gonna jump on in to the Dark Tower, but then I have this other book that I'm like, I really want to read this other book, but I keep getting caught up with the Dark Tower books all the time.
Having a month in between is like a little bit of slow work. I will skip to the end of fun. I want to keep going, but then I don't want to confuse thoughts from the next.
I actually put off reading Songs of Susannah too long, because when I left Wolves of Kala, I was kind of frustrated, and I don't even want to say sick of the characters, because it's not the right word, but I was like, I needed a break from the characters. And then when we get into Songs of Susannah, I didn't feel that you leave that at the end of the cliffhanger at the end of Wolves of Kala, you're like, what happened to Susannah? Where'd she go? And when I jumped in, I wasn't like, oh, I gotta know. I didn't have that feeling of excitement anymore. So that's why I think it felt a little like it felt like it took forever just for them to get through the door. And then it took forever for us to find out everything. I kind of like the way that Stephen King introduces us to Susannah walking through the door from another person's perspective. But anyway, I just felt like, oh my God, nothing is going to happen. And then it's like for 200 pages, like, well, where is Roland and Eddie? Because when they go through the door, you think something bad happened to Eddie. And then Mia's telling you, or not Mia, but that Sayer guy tells you that Eddie's dead. And then I felt like he was trying to build a lot of tension, but I was getting frustrated. Like, oh my God, I just wish. And it might have been because I was doing the audio book and I didn't have the book in front of me. But anyway.
I think generally, we look at the series, 1 in 6 are the least loved books in the series. They're different.
You're cutting out, Jeff.
Sorry, maybe I'm not close enough.
It's better now.
Okay. I think I was saying 1 in 6 tend to be the least favored of people, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 tend to be love different things, but those is their favorite. And 7 is very divisive. This is divisive. He divides.
Oh, really?
So which one's your favorite?
The glib answer I give is whichever one I happen to be reading at the time.
I love that.
I think between 2, 4, and 5. Those tend to be my favorites. Just depending on how they strike me.
You're not a fan of the Wastelands?
It's okay. No, I don't know. Which is ironic because the first one I ever read. So you think it would hold a special place in the heart. I don't know. That one doesn't strike me as interesting.
I just felt, so this is the thing. I felt like Gunslinger was confusing. I didn't like the way it was written. I think the writing style is definitely way different in these books than that one. And then book 2 was just so good because you got introduced to all these characters in such a unique way. It was the novelty of it, really. I mean, Stephen King has always been excellent at creating characters. There's no doubt about it. Then I liked book 3 because now we're on this journey. And then it stops in book 4 and 5. And then here in 6, we're still not going anywhere. So I think that's my problem with that. So Brandy says here, can we talk about it was actually written like a song? Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that.
I did. I thought that was cool. Like, I'm glad that you were able to catch that. Like, with the different songs, and then each chapter like ended with, the stanza and the response or whatever. I thought that was cool, and it made sense, especially like the title. But I'm not gonna lie, I was a little confused with why he chose that for this book. And but there are a lot of references. Maybe I'm answering the question right now, but there are a lot of references to songs in all of the other books, like how he's even when he was in front of the crowd at Caliber and Sturgis, and they're doing the song and he's dancing, right? There's all these references to music and stuff. So I just wonder why this is the only one where it's written like it's a song and it's not in the other ones. If I'm making sense, I don't know.
Read the title. Song of Susannah. I don't know if there's a reason for it. Is this one where he introduced the hypnotized? Talking about like the song of the turtle. Kind of what he hears to write. Maybe. Yeah, definitely a theme book.
So I'm not a musician, so it was like reading a poem before each chapter, and a poem that I did not understand.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's like the poetry too, right? And there's all these mentions of the different poems and I'm not as versed in poetry either. Like, you know, I like music and stuff, but you know, with poetry and stuff, I always find myself having to reread it in order to like catch more of the meaning. Because I think with poetry, it's more like the meaning and how you feel whenever you're reading it. And I think I was watching a video with Philip Chase, right? And he was talking about poetry, and poetry is different from, you know, just reading like a regular book, because from what he was saying is like you really should try to read it like out loud, because even the way that the words are written invokes a certain kind of hid extra meaning with the pauses and the way that things rhyme and the way that things are said. Like the rhythm is also part of the extra meaning, because even when he was doing the songs here at the end of each chapter, like you kind of felt that tension coming, especially with some of the later ones where it was like, Kamala, come, like you're feeling this urgency as he's going through it, and you're like, okay, I gotta get to the next one because I'm feeling this this energy, you know. It's like this energy that is infused into it aside from like the words. I don't know.
Okay. Before we wrap up, we've got time, but I want to talk about some of the things that we learn here, especially. So we were in two different worlds, right? The New York of Susannah in 1999, and the New York, or well, not the New York anymore, but the Vermont or Maine area of where Stephen King and Roland and Eddie are. So I expected there to be a bit more going on with getting Calvin to sign over that deed. It seemed like we were getting this tension, and then he's like, okay, whatever it was that Roland had said to him outside, and the fact that he told him that he was Roland of Gilead, and he's like, are you really? And he starts crying, there's all that, and then he's like, comes back in and he signs over the deed. But I liked how you get to see a possible future to that, with the rose still being in the garden inside the black, or what is it, the Black Tower? Is that what they called it? The apartment building or office building? So the rose is still there, and the garden's been donated by the ka-tet, essentially, right? I liked that. So what do you guys think of that part? The way that you see we know it's just a possible future because we've been fooled before.
Jeff, I'll let you go first. My dog keeps barking.
That's okay. Yeah, that whole piece with the tech corporation and what's the office building and then, what's happening in the high rise and all that. That's interesting. That's a piece that I always kind of like read through real fast, and I don't put too much thought into it. But I think this time I'm definitely going to pay more attention. You know, too many spoilers that we're not done with that office building. What's happening in there? So it's a cool aspect of it, and I think the reason probably the whole Calvin Tower stuff was in front of it is we know what's going to go. And again, we know he and Aaron Deeper are the ones that saved their Callahan and laundromat. So it's probably something they didn't just drag out. But yeah, it's an interesting part of the lore that I think by the time I get to part of the series, it's so like just truck it to the end that I don't really engage in it that much. But there's probably more to it.
There was a lot of. I'm sorry. Before, sorry. Or I just want to say.
Oh no, you're fine.
There were a lot of things towards the end that only made sense because you knew what was happening with Roland and Eddie, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But go ahead, Ursi. What were you going to say about the tower?
So I always felt like a lot of the stuff that happens in the book, like you see this reason, this extra meaning, right, as to why things are happening, right? And even the characters, they don't fully understand why they do some of the things that they do. Like they kind of feel like they're compelled to kind of do those things, like how in the end with, you know, Stephen King, and he's like compelled to even just write the story, right? Or or how they're just compelled to go to these certain locations. So I think even with the rose being like saved, like the people in that were probably erecting it were probably like, for some reason, like they just can't destroy it, like there's like this extra thing, like this energy pulling, influencing their behavior, I should say, like around certain things with the Dark Tower. And even as things are starting to deteriorate with, the world is moving on and stuff, people are still acting in a way that is controlled by this extra meta, even if it is Stephen King writing them, right? Like there's something influencing them. So I think even with the rose, I just kept thinking of that. Like there's like always like these extra things that are making them do the things that they do.
I
And
love
I
that.
was
Because it's always and I have a feeling, obviously people write there was no internet to Twitter or message, message but I think he had his ear to the ground about some of the criticism about him and his writing, and obviously probably critiques other writers. And this, all along the story we see, you guys see this on reread that people come up with these intuitions, or they'll have a thought, or they'll want to do this thing because they're kind of compelled to it, or they know the truth of something. And the fact that it's King writing this into their heads, I think is a clever way to kind of say, of course they had that intuition. I put it there, and the scale that plays out in the rest of the story. Now we know that King is directing things, or is at least the conduit that they was directing. When he gave, you got one free pass to give Jake key, pass key into the hotel room. And so Jake gets a note and a key from Stephen King. So he's like able to sort of interject the two-sex machina in a very, very literal sense. So now we see more of that. It could be interpreted differently in both steps.
Yeah, that's interesting you brought up about Jake and the key, because it's like, how did he do that? All he did was write a note and eat it, right? And he hasn't written this, so it's not like he wrote this part of the story and therefore it happens in the world Jake's in. Because remember, Jake and Oy and Father Callahan are not in the real world. So is that a world that Stephen King has written, or some Stephen King has written? We don't know.
Not in the real. I always thought they were in the same Keystone world, just 22 years apart, or whatever. It's like,
I didn't think about that.
There and now.
Can they? Can they be in the same world at two different periods of time? Or in the multiverse, everything is a present and that time period is different because they're different.
We can jump forward to where Jake, Callahan, and Susannah are, but we can't come back. So I think Eddie's interpreting it. It is one world. They're just under the time which can only move forward. Time is moving forward.
So does that mean that Roland and Eddie are going to be much older when they finally meet up with? Oh, did you just give us a spoiler, Jeff? Because I thought they were looking for another way, another doorway, because they're two separate worlds. So I thought they were looking for a doorway to where Susannah is. But if they're all in the same world, but 40 years apart, what's gonna happen?
I'm like, okay, I really need to read this this next one. I'm just so ready for this next one. And it's like I have like these bittersweet feelings of like I'm really excited to like read the next one and find out like what's gonna happen. But then I'm also like, no, but this is gonna end. But I can just read them over again,
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking. The same thing. I was like, oh, this is the last one. And yeah, we have the novella, but that doesn't really count. But then I thought, well, I want to read Gunslinger again. So it's really just I just come back around. It never really ends. Just kind of like, Stephen King's world. It just never ends.
In fact, recently he did an interview with the Kingcast, which is a podcast all about Stephen King. He finally wanted to talk about the podcast stuff. And he talked, I guess, the latest fighting book that Mark has Dark Tower mentioned. They asked him, are you done with Dark Tower? He said, well, everything I'm writing. So there could be more. And I've always thought more will always be see maybe looking forward to Martin's English user class. Went into people as a getting to as well. I'd love to see the young
More young Roland. Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
I feel like there's also a gap, right, between the end of Wizard of Glass and why he went after Walter. Unless I missed something, I still don't understand.
I think there's a lot of material to be covered there. There's the whole, you get a glimpse of the Jericho Hill battle. It's something just telling, but I think this is the whole war with the good man. There's tons of material.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you do find out what happens to his hometown or home, I'm going to call it hometown, because they say something about that's how the beam quake is what happened to destroyed. I can't remember the name of the place where he's from, but so we know that that's what happened. He wasn't there at the time. That was one of the things he talks about, how the world, and that's another reason why I want to reread Gunslinger, because I remember in Gunslinger he talks about how the world is dying. The world has moved on, but we never really know where it's moved on from, right? What was it like before? We see a little bit of blood and all of that, but you're like, what happened? And now we find out that there's been that these beams haven't only, I didn't know that all the beams weren't there. I just assumed they're following one of the beams, and there's still all these beams, but you find out now that there are only 2 beams still up. So that means that only the world along those 2 beams still exists. The rest of the world's been destroyed.
Which is
So it makes you wonder.
Sad.
Right? It makes me wonder, is it going to reset? If they save the Dark Tower, will everything reset and the beams go back up? And and that's
Big
another
Bang?
thing. So one of the other things you learn from Mia is why the Dark Tower is dying. Right? It's because magic is fading from the world and science is taking over. So do we want to talk about that a little bit?
I wonder what kind of commentary he's trying to say with that, because I know with Stephen King, in general, I follow him on Twitter and stuff. He's very outspoken. He's super liberal, right? And I can see that being sort of an influence or maybe some kind of inspiration with that, but it's also kind of how people kind of go with biblical versus science kind of thing. You should have faith and things will, if you're more religious and stuff, having faith in the unknown, right, will strengthen you. But then on the other side, you have with science, just knowing and discovering these facts of the world, right, will also strengthen you for knowing, science and stuff, right? And I'm just curious to know what his commentary is with that, because with him being as liberal as he is, and critical of, a lot of people in the world, right? I'm just curious as to why he's sort of trying to let go of the magic, or having this loss, this mourning the loss of magic, right? but while also in real life, he's very grounded in his political and his beliefs, right? Like all his beliefs in terms, I don't know. It's like very, it's a very weird,
It's contrary, right?
yeah. Or even because even then in I'm sorry, even in the gunslinger, when he is in Lud, he has this very bizarre feeling towards the people doing this ritual, this religious ritual, right? He's looking at them like they're all crazy. So that's sort of like another observation of that, or even if like the religion is distorted because of the loss of magic. I don't know. I have so many questions.
Yeah, my wheels spinning. I can only conjecture, but I think if you think about human time, the ages, the less we knew, the more everything was magical. From the stars in the sky, right? It's the big right? The sun around the earth. All the, all of the Roman gods, Greek gods, and imaginative, mythical answers to many things. And the more we learn from science, the more the myth and the magic goes away. And I wonder if it's a warning of that or a commentary on that further along we go down this stage of reason, science, imagination is everything. It is written out
I didn't hear the last thing you said about after science.
just or some maybe for someone like him whose imagination is everything. It's putting imagination and myth, magic, smaller.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It also kind of reminded me a little bit of the never ending story, right? So the people stopped reading, so the world and the never ending story started to be devoured by the nothing. It was starting to destroy itself because there wasn't anything. I mean, it never really says in the story that the readers were fueling it, but it was their imagination that made the story go on, right? And in this, it's almost like the imagination of the writer and the readers combined together created these worlds that are held up by or connected by the Dark Tower, held up by these beams. And as people stop believing, even the writer Stephen King and the readers, and also the people within those worlds, they start relying more on science and they move away from that imagination. The world starts to be destroyed. But here, there's more to that. It's not just something that happens, it's something that's being sped up by the breakers and the Crimson King. So, nice segue into another part of what we learn about in Songs of Susannah. So, in Song of Susannah, this is the only thing about this book that I think it was done so well is he finally gives you all this information, but it still doesn't make sense. So you're not like, oh, okay, I have everything I need, so I don't really need to move on. Um, he, so you know more now about the Crimson King, right? You even know more about what's going on with the wolves of Kala, right? Now you go to the place of the children, or you kind of go to the place of the children where there's all these real mysteries around that. But I thought Roland was the Crimson King, but Stephen King tells us that he thinks I'm not Roland, I'm sorry. What's the guy's name from The Stand? Why am I drawing a blank? Huh? Randall Flagg. Now, Randall Flagg was the Crimson King. When we first hear about Crimson King a couple of books ago, I was like, oh, I bet Randall Flagg is. But then he says that he thinks that Martin or Walter, that Randall Flagg is another version of him. So he has many faces and he travels worlds. And so it's like, okay, so his boss is a Crimson King. Who is this Crimson King? The Dark Lord. Who is he? And what is his goal? What did you get from this that told you, he wants to break this world and he's being promised, to be king over what's left? I was confused about that. What did you gather? from this book?
So I was confused by that as well. It there's always like this pinpointing of like who is it, it's Walter. Like, you know, for the longest I was always like, oh, Walter, you know, because he was also like changing his name and stuff, and even his influence over Mia, right? No, was he the one influencing Mia? Because was he the one that conned Mia too?
I think he might have been part of it, but I just think it was like the Sayer.
Oh yeah, Richard Sayer, yeah. And so then even like the involvement of like Richard Sayer, like I felt like those were some of the parts that I kept like having to go back a little bit and try to figure out. And I still couldn't really figure it out. So it was just like a little, that was one of the confusing parts for me. Just because you don't really, like, you kind of don't know who the real villain is and stuff in this thing, you know, like the Crimson King or Richard Sayer or Walter. Yeah, I was just confused.
I have a theory. I think, and I go back and forth on this theory, but is the Crimson King Stephen? Is it Eddie talks about something, you know, like if Stephen King were to write a plane crash, well, in Eddie's world, if Eddie's living in a Stephen King world, then it was Stephen King that killed all those people. If something bad happens to, you know, Roland and Eddie, it's because Stephen King wrote it to happen. So is he the one that's willing to bring down the tower because that's just what he wants to write for the ending of his book, or the conflict for the book? So is Stephen King the Crimson King?
I mean, if we're gonna have these like dual things with similar names, that kind of makes sense.
But like, is Ka King? You know, Ka is always like, well, Roland's like, well, whatever Ka wants us to do, well, whatever the writer wants him to do, he'll do. Like, Roland's just getting pushed along like a player on a board by the writer.
Well, then Stephen King may be Ka, but I still think there's a big bad. And now we have this other thing called Gone that is now seems like the good part of the yin and the yang, if you will, the light to the darkness. So I want to believe it's more than just Stephen King wanting to write The Dark Tower being down, because I want to believe that. But until we read the next book, I guess we won't know for sure. But yeah, there's just...
The thing that makes me flip back is that it seems like Stephen King is afraid of, he feels like it's just whenever he writes in the world of the world, like it's more visible to the person and him, and now he's at risk. So,
well, I saw it as him because he's channeling what's happening in the world. He's literally writing down. So I'm going to say this. It's kind of like how I believe the Bible was written. So the Bible was written by people that didn't actually witness these things happening, but they say that they, you know, Christians believe that the Bible was written because they were channeling God's word through the Holy Ghost. And that's how I kind of pictured what was happening with Stephen King, that he was connected. Either he's connected to the world, or is it Gone, or is it Ka, or is it some other force that's sending him this information to write it down. And because at the time that he's writing that, he's opened himself up to these other worlds, he's now opened himself up to the Crimson King. So that's how I saw it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when, when Pippin looks into the orb and he sees the Eye of Sauron in Lord of the Rings. That's the only time that Sauron can see him is through that orb, or when Frodo puts on the ring. You know, otherwise he's invisible to the Dark Lords. That's what I thought. And he even says in all of his acknowledgments in every book, and he even said in here that this, when he in his diary, or maybe he says it to Roland and Eddie, that this was his Lord of the Rings. He wanted this to be his Lord of the Rings. So I saw a lot of like I believe that that Black 13 is like that orb. I wish I could remember the name of it from Lord of the Rings, where they use it to, where Saruman uses it to communicate with Sauron.
I really like both of you guys' interpretations of that because I was so confused. I'll just go
I
with
think it's
what
on
you guys
purpose. I think Stephen King is a genius. He leaves these things open enough for you to be able to interpret it as you will, and it makes for most readers, I think, like that. We wouldn't read unless we wanted a world that we could kind of live in and experience.
said.
And it makes it even better if you feel like you have kind of I don't want to say a say, but you know, where you're kind of it's the story is requires your input, if you will, to complete. But there are a lot of people that, especially with his endings, because they leave his endings open ended. I love that. I love it because it makes me go, okay, well, I think this is what happened to those characters, and this is what happened with the story going forward. I mean, he ends it well enough. It's not like he goes cliffhanger ending and you don't know what is going to happen.
And then
yeah. But I can't stand those books that have like the perfect ending and then they have an epilogue and they wrap everything up. I was like, oh man, can you just let me imagine what happens? Was it happily ever after? Maybe it wasn't for me.
Yeah, I go back and forth with that too. Like sometimes I like an epilogue. Like it depends, but then sometimes I'm trying to think of what book was The Memory Police, right? I read by Yoko Ogawa, and that one, it's like speculative fiction, and like the ending, a lot of people go back and forth with like whether they like it or not. But because like to me, it's sort of like magical realism kind of thing. I feel like a lot of books within that genre kind of do leave it very ambiguous, and it allows for further like discussion and further like you don't need to have all the answers and you're going to be okay, and I think that is sort of what we're getting here. Even with like ending what the Wastelands, right, with the train, and for so long people were waiting until the next one, right, and being like, what's going to happen with the train, right? And then people, that leads to these discussions, and then it winds up being like Eddie with his jokes, and like, who would have thought of that, like I think waiting for those answers or it's just part of the fun of it, right?
We didn't have to wait though, aren't we lucky?
Yeah.
Comparison. It's part of the fun of watching Lost for those that are watching it. Well, the broadcast was, what does this mean? Where does that go? And they kind of played into that a lot when like in between seasons they would have like maybe games to play and you get a little bit more backstory. But I do like that especially run to it. You do engage for this person. As long as there's a payoff, as long as you get I was right, I was wrong. That's
I think but you say it makes the reader feel like they're part of the creative process.
I think in the case of like in this one, where I think that genius thing that there's a real world element to it. And Anne Rice does this a little bit in the Vampire Chronicles as well. The fact that like there is a writer who has written a stats story and it's a best-selling book. So in the book, Lestat see his book of the New York Times bestsellers. So you're like, it's that price. So it's the whole like the real world element that if you let your mind go, this is real. Maybe this is all real. You can kind of play along that way. Rational. Like science.
I agree.
I always think of it like how they do in what was it in like Loki, like the show Loki, where he was like anytime that there's like an extra step or whatever, then another line of the universe is created, and that's why there's all these multiverses, right? Or every action that you do, there's a new universe created. Or even so, I guess him just with his writing too, it's like every word that he writes is another branch And I always like anytime that we have like something like a multiverse kind of conversation, I always wind up going like, or even I think me and my husband were talking about like dreams too. Like with dreams, like is that like a window into another like universe, right? Like I don't know. It's just I always love just seeing where all these influences come from, because even like with him talking about JFK, right? And now I know that like I still haven't read it yet, what 11/22/63, and he keeps referring to him as another gunslinger. Um just all these inclusions, and like you can just see his influence from a lot of stuff, and I always think that's so cool, and like I admire that.
I think of bring up the JFK thing. I think it was either Callahan or Eddie wondered if they could do the Norway game to go back and stop the JFK assassination. There it is.
So Brandy says here, she just started Insomnia, and even though I am in the very beginning, the Crimson King has already come up. Yes, and the death bags. So I don't know if you picked up on this. They talk about death bags, and they notice this black aura around Stephen King. And he says Roland tells Eddie that they call it something, and he's like, what is that? He's like, it's death bag. And if you haven't read Insomnia, you don't know what that means. Read it, because it adds another nuance to the story. Because I mean, you already know what's going to happen, but I didn't. Right? They talked about the death bag, and I didn't know. I mean, I thought it was Stephen King. He lives. I knew he was going to get hit by the car, but he lives. Right? We know that in our world he lives, but here he doesn't. So that death bag has a whole nother. That was so good.
So Insomnia is a good one to read before book 7, but you don't have to. And then Hearts in Atlantis, I don't remember where you can read that, but if you want to read Hearts in Atlantis, book 7.
I feel like I missed so many. I wish I had read. So I read The Stand many years ago, and I remember like the basics of it, but I don't remember all of the details. And now I wish I had read it before Wizard and Glass. I think that probably would have been the best time to read it again, because I think what's so cool about it is they're not direct connections, right? Because what you see in Kansas in Wizard and Glass is not exactly what happens in The Stand. They're connected, there are similarities, but they're still different. And I like that. We know this because there was obviously a whole nother world, different car names, things like that. I just thought that was really cool. So his books, we always think, oh, there's these direct connections, but they're not really direct connections. They're similar worlds where similar things would happen. And that's why I was irritated when he was like, it felt like he was trying to say, oh, this is why all my books are connected to the Dark Tower, because I'm, channeling the multiverse. It's like, no, just leave it alone.
But it could
Don't
just
explain
be,
it.
yeah, it could just be like he's explaining it, but then that's the explanation in like that one universe, and then like in another parallel universe, it could just be something different, That's what I'm gonna do. And then we should reread all the connecting books.
Yes. It'll only take a few years.
Reach our 70s.
Yo, so many books. That's
And all the
novella.
All those short stories. I'll say that Stephen King is not my favorite when it comes to short stories. I wish I liked him more, but there are so many people who say, oh, when he writes short, well, I think Joseph even said his shorter books are his better books, but I really like the way he can make you love his characters. You could read his characters going through the most mundane stuff, even with friggin' Susannah and Mia in this book. I still wanted to read every single moment, even though I was like, okay, get on with it. Because it just felt like a lot of talking and not a lot of experiencing. But anyway, so in his short stories, I think that's where he still does a great job in creating characters. Obviously, many movies have been made based on his short stories. but it loses some of that nuance because you're not spending, hundreds of pages of them doing things, getting to know them. It's very condensed, and I feel like it loses some of its impact.
I've been saying for a while too, like novella length is good for movie adaptation. It's like it's the perfect kind of like directly. And now with these streaming series or limited run series, that's good for like a good chunky novel. And then a series, like the Dark Tower, let's say, or Halo Time or something like that's great for good TV.
Mhm.
That's the measures that we'll try to cram 11, 13 fantasy book, and they're trying to make it a 5-minute movie. The fans like,
Yeah, I remember like when that movie came out for the Dark Tower. Like I still want to see it. Like I haven't seen it yet, but he's already rolling his eyes. But I remember like a lot of people were just like, what did they do? And I was just now I'm like excited to see it just to be like to rag on it, like because I know as complex as this is, like how are you gonna I already know you can't just put this in one movie. Like there's no way.
So is the movie the whole thing, or is it just the gunslinger?
No, the movie it's weird, bastardized version. I've said it before. It's a quick summary of a Wikipedia page that someone series. That's what it is. They try to just take elements that would make like cool visuals and cool thing. It doesn't have Eddie and Susannah in it at all. It's Roland and Jake, but it's nothing like the books. It's got the breakers. It's got Michael Santo from this upcoming book that we're about to get to. It's got the Man in Black. It's just all. It's like 8 minutes too. They didn't even try to like do a 3-hour Lord of the Rings type movie. It's like short. You just
Yeah, I want to see. Like I still like I'm curious. It's like to complete the journey, you know what I mean, and just be like, because I know. So for example, right, like with Game of Thrones, I feel like, aside from the last season and whatever they did there, I still felt like they did a good job with, knowing that these are super complex books. You have to dedicate the time to make it a series, right? And I feel like if you're going to do that, if they are ever going to do that with the Dark Tower and like sort of, fix their errors in making it a movie, right? Like it would have to be like a longer series at least. Well, but then again, there are some instances where it's like with Wolves of the Kala, would that make a good series of them like dragging out?
I think so.
Yeah.
So I'll have to tell you my twist to it after you guys can accept. But if I were the showrunner, said definitely go ahead and make Dark Tower. It would be one book per season. You do it just through a lot of people that try to adapt it. You start with Wizard in class. You do like the Roland and David court stuff. Roland is a boy getting gunslinger into wizards in class, into the gunslinger. But I still just do it the way the books are. One book per season. If you wanted to throw Gloria in with the gunslinger, you could probably do that, but you wouldn't have to. And if you need to do flashbacks, do flashbacks. So much of Roland, because it's all about Roland loves story. He loves Eric Gallagher's story. He loves told his story. So fine, go ahead and do flashbacks like Boston. Boston was all about the flashback story. That's all you gotta do. Just do it. It's my rule that I always say with every adaptation. It's just an exercise in format. All you have to do is take the book and instead of he said or he reached for the knife, just put person who said it. But person reaches for a knife. Like it's all you gotta do. little different consultants. That's why people love the books. Exact Netflix, HBO, Amazon. Amazon has a pilot. They have a pilot and a couple of skills of leaked from it. I think it was the guy who did was Pantera did the first two seasons of Walking Dead. And for some reason Amazon didn't want to go. They thought it would be too expensive.
I don't know why they would think that, because so much of the books take place in either like an Old West type, you know, or in New York. And they make TV shows all the time in New York. And they make, like, how many different Old West series are going on right now? We got like a ton of them. So that's silly. That's just
Well,
silly. Unless Stephen King's making it expensive.
Could be. Well, I'll tell you why it was Netflix, though, because they're blowing all their budget on all these romantic romance dating shows.
Okay.
There's like 20 coming out right now on Netflix.
I think Amazon blew its budget on Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, that too. And
And it's not even good.
aren't they trying to do like a Avatar Avatar show too, with The Last Airbender? Because remember, like M Night Shyamalan was like, you know, he made his movie and like everyone hated it, and then I think, but now they're like supposedly, allegedly, right? They've got like this unlimited budget to like make it however as the best they can do it to make like a real life action Avatar, you know, Airbender show or whatever. Like, I feel like they need to have an appropriate budget if they're ever going to do the Dark Tower. Like, you want to do it right because of how many dedicated fans there are of these books. Like, and if they were to mess it up, it'd be like, you know, George R. R. Martin in Game of Thrones, right? Like,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like, this has got to be special effects. Like, it just,
No, it doesn't.
Go out in Western towns and some clothes. You know, I think all of the ingredients are there, and you can, like the speaking rank demon portion, you can do it, make special effects, or you can just find a clever showrunner that knows how to do it and build suspense to do it. Let's see.
It would be really cool if you also had like every season a couple of episodes that went into one of his other book worlds. Like, you know, you'd have a whole episode that was like some scenes from the Stand world, or, you know, not the Stand, but scenes from those worlds, and that the readers would recognize to kind of link all of it together. We should just do it. We should start Kickstarter and just.
Yeah.
I mean, you know people in the film industry, Jeff. You know people that know how to make movies.
All right, I'll get on that. Give me
So Brandy says here, I love his short stories. Every once in a while I get one I don't like much, but for the most part I have fun reading them. I'm not saying they're bad. They're just not his best work. Of all of his works, his short stories I think are his weakest. But they're still good.
Short is tough to write. I have a huge respect for the short story. When you have enough time and enough page count, work count, do anything. But short is like, you know, you have an economy and be clever and figure out to do it right. It's, you know, it's a budget. Pulling something on a low budget versus a big budget. It's hard. I always see the short stories.
I sometimes wonder that he doesn't just publish his palate cleansers. Like, he has like a, you know, I think even if you read his On Writing book, he talks about taking a break and writing other things when you get stuck. You know, you get like a writer's block. I don't think he calls it that, but sometimes I wonder if he doesn't just write these things kind of like an exercise, you know, to get his creative juices going, or, you know, when he's getting stuck and he's like, okay, because he always says, I think he says in that book, you know, set it aside, because when you're stuck, you're stuck. And then he's like, oh, I'm just going to publish all of these things that I've written.
Oh, like Brandon Sanderson.
Oh my God, Brandon Sanderson. That guy just trips and writes a book.
Oh
I
my
loved it though.
gosh.
There's so many memes about Brandon Sanderson and so many YouTube skits that have been done of him accidentally writing books that when I saw that YouTube video, I was like, this, it's almost like he made fun of himself.
Yeah.
It was great. It was
Oh
perfect.
man. Oh, we lost Jeff. But man, I just think that's crazy. I feel like Stephen King, Brandon Sanderson, who those mystery John Grisham, right? Like who else? What's the romance writer? Robin, no. What's the romance writer?
JD Robb
Yeah.
writes
She's
like
another
3
one.
books a year. I don't know how that, everybody, I've read that whole, I stopped reading it like book 40, but it's
Yeah.
like,
Wow.
and they're so good. It's like I don't feel like I'm just reading the same material over and over and over
That's
again.
good,
Each
though.
one feels good or is, feels unique. It's like, how does she do that? I mean,
That's dope.
3 novels a year. That's just crazy.
I
But
respect that.
some people just have a talent for it and it just comes out of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just Brandon Sanderson. It's like one surprise book, okay, and then he keeps going. I was like,
He went, man. That was
Yeah.
I feel like that's really cool though. Like I feel like it I know it's like off topic and stuff, but I felt like that whole thing that he did, I really think it lit a fire under the butt of like a lot of people in the publishing world of like you know what I mean? Like these publishers, like these publishing giants and stuff, like he's doing it on Kickstarter. Like what? Like
Nope.
Random House who? Scholastic who? Like
Well, and they're high quality books, right? You're not getting the cheap, cardboard, cheap paper that you get from your regular publisher, and people are buying them. So it tells the publishing companies that there's if you, and these aren't established books, right? Like he's done the
Yeah.
Kickstarter thing with his series that he already knows he has a following and people want the leather bound fancy signed books. But these are brand new books. Nobody even knows the title. They have no idea what they're even about.
I think
And he
that's
just
crazy.
made $25 million in a couple of days. Why? Because if you are an artist that people respect, that you've been consistent, people will spend the money. And the publishing houses aren't taking advantage of that. And I applaud Brandon Sanderson for doing it himself, because now that money is going into his pocket and his employees' pocket.
Yep.
And so now he can just keep,
Good for
doing
him.
his fans want material. You see that here. If they didn't care, they'd be like, I'll wait till it comes out.
Yeah.
They want it. They don't care what it's about. They know they're going to like it.
And I feel
So
like Stephen King is sort of the same way too. Like anytime that he publishes a book, like there's always this like, mass like excitement about it. Like he's got that one coming out in September, I think, a fairy tale.
Yeah, everybody is crazy about it. I haven't even looked at synopsis. I haven't watched any videos. I don't want to know what it's about. I just want to read it.
I think that's so cool.
What was that, Jeff?
Take my money.
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
There you go.
I was you were talking about the Brandon Sanderson thing, and he took he made $22 million in a couple days. I tried that. I made about 22 cents.
So sorry, Jeff.
No.
I want a leather-bound fancy signed version of the Champion Saga. So you better get on that Kickstarter. Randy will back you.
Actually, I was thinking I do want to do some hardbound. So maybe it'll be a Kickstarter.
I need to read the second book so I can. Are you through the beta reading process for the third book yet?
I don't know. Am I Brandy?
Oh,
sorry, Randy. She brought up the Champion Saga. I did not.
I wasn't gonna say anything. Yeah, I think we're getting close. It's not just Brandy. I've got it out.
that's exciting though.
I think Brandy is.
So she says, take my money. I'm assuming about the leather bound books and not about the beta. She's paying you off so she doesn't have to be your beta reader anymore. Just kidding. If I don't finish the second book in time to be a beta reader, please consider me for an ARC, and I will definitely read it and review it.
Sure. Let me know when you're done.
Actually,
I'll get you a manuscript copy of it.
I want to actually read the first one again because I read it while I was listening to your podcast the first time, and I want to go through and just read it because one of the bad things, I love doing the immersion where I'm listening and reading it, but my eyes tend to wander and you miss stuff. It doesn't matter how hard you try to listen, you're always going to miss stuff. And I think I was watching a video with you and Steve talking about the first book. I think it was Steve, or maybe we were just chatting, but you had mentioned stuff and I was like, I don't remember that part. So I have to go back and reread it. So I want to do that and then jump into the second one because I think there were things that I missed that would have made it that much better for me. But man, and reading Dark Tower also I think would add some to it. You don't know Ursi, but there are some very some things that I don't want to say they're parallel, but you could tell where he got his inspiration for his story.
Nice.
And having read more of Dark Tower now, there are things in that I read in the first book that I now have more appreciation for. I like it. I like it even more.
Nice. Yeah, because I'm still in the middle of Jeff's book on my Kindle. So then Joseph's book. I'm sorry. All these J names. But yeah, I'm still in the middle of Joseph's book. So I still have to finish up that one. Just these Dark Tower books keep slowing me down.
I know,
right?
Like
you want to read all the books, and I keep getting slowed down. But
I'm in so many different buddy reads.
Three books.
So Brandy says she's working on it.
I'm giving you her.
Oh no. She says she put her notes in the Kindle and now she's having trouble accessing. Well, I would tell you how to do it, but I have no idea. I know there's a way to do it online, but so Joseph says the next one is thick.
Thick books are good. I like them.
Bigger than a snake.
I also, Jeff, want a sequel to One Way. I know that was something that you've been planning on, but are you waiting to see how the movie does? Is that the reason why it's taking so long? You're like, I'm not going to invest.
So it's weird being in the independent author game because part of it is you want to, at least I do, my journey is every time I write a book, I would like to see if I can get it published in the traditional big houses and things like that. So every time I finish a book, I'll query agents and try to go down that route. And then after a while, I just get too fancy and want to get it out. So I'll put it out in myself. And with a series, it's kind of hard to go and spend all the time to write a book 2 of something that book 1 never got picked up by, unless you're just definitely just getting it out. So I kind of committed that I would finish the Champion saga, or the first trilogy of the Champion saga, get that out. And before I kind of go further down the path, I think I have to decide if I want to try something new, start some ideas, things that I can do, or do I want to just go with the? It can definitely be a really.
Yeah.
I've got to make some decisions, and then I've got to balance it with maybe the showrunner of the Dark Tower series. That's I got to figure out.
Good luck.
We got a good one on our hands here. I think we can do it. Oh man.
I mean, you definitely have the best ideas. I don't understand. You say it all the time when we talk about adaptations. It's like the best ones are where they literally take the dialogue and just turn it into a script. I think we talked about Stand By Me being an example of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't understand. I will say the Lord of the Rings movies, even though if you've read the books, they are not exactly like the books. They did an excellent job.
Mhm.
And they added stuff where things needed to be added. Like I forgot when I read Lord of the Rings, there are no battle scenes in Lord of the Rings described to you. You know that the battles happen. You know the outcome of the battles, but you do not experience the battles. And if you do, it's very, very short. So when I was watching or read the books a second time, I was remembering what happened in the movies, and you get to that part of the movie like, oh wow, that that didn't like you're told about the Oliphants, but that's it.
Mhm.
You're just told about them. There's no battle with them. You're told they went and stampeded over people, but you don't witness it in the book.
Mhm.
So I think that they added things in the right places, and that's what made those movies so successful because they added. Yes, it was an excellent adaptation.
Except they took out the best ending.
Oh well.
Come back and clean house in the Shire. You know, humans and things. Like, how do you leave that part? That was of the 8 endings of Return of the King. You leave off the best one.
That's true. And no Tom Bombadil.
Well, some people would say that wasn't a big one.
I'm going to say this, and I know this has nothing to do with the Dark Tower, but Tom Bombadil, the first time I read it, I was like, what is this? And then after the movie, I was like, wait, what happened to Tom? And I went back to read it a second time. So I've read the books many times. The second time, I skipped all the way through to the inn when they get to. So I read the beginning, and then the whole thing in the woods in Tom Bombadil, I skipped it, and I was like, it doesn't explain where they originally get their swords. So Frodo gets his sword sting from Bilbo, but where are the swords for the other one? There's so many things that happen. So I went back and reread just that part because I felt like I was missing something. Tom Bombadil is the only true good guy in all of the series. Every other character is a little bit realistic. I should say good guy. Good guy's not the word. He's the only true good force. So you've got the Dark Tower, which is true evil, and everybody else is some kind of mortal, maybe slightly immortal. You got the elves, but even the elves have their own thing. Tom Bombadil is the only true being that's good, like true light to the darkness. Does that make sense? So if you go back and reread it, you'll know what I mean. And so
Tom Bombadil of the Dark Tower series.
yes.
Boy.
Maybe.
Mhm.
Oh, Oi, I love Oi. Okay,
I know.
this book, I was like, if they kill Oi, I'm going to be so pissed. When he went in front of that car, I was like, I'm going to start reading right now.
It's always the animals that were just like, yeah, like don't do it.
Star Wars series, it's always the droids. Like everybody haven't seen Rogue One, but everybody in Rogue One dies. But the one people everybody cried over was the droid, K2SO, Nita.
Mm-hmm. Always, or even when we were talking about like Gardens of the Moon last month, and I was just stuck on the horses. The horses that I was so upset. Yeah, but I was right there with you. I was like, they better not do anything to Oi.
Well, I mean, you make him cry in the very beginning. So now I love him even more. And then the first thing that happens when they get on the other side of the door, after all those hundreds of pages that I had to read, wondering what was going on with Jake and Oi, and we finally get to them, and first thing that happens is he runs out in traffic, and you're thinking he dies until you finally find out what. I was like, oh, King, you suck. But he didn't do it.
I really like that he did that with Oi. Like how you see that connection with him and Jake. Like I thought that was just so sweet. Like, I mean, people love their dogs. Like I love my dog, right? My dog is my little bud, right? And I can just see that like compassion that they have for each other and that love. And because even I think Roland was even surprised at how like affectionate Oi is with Jake, and and vice versa. Like obviously, like a boy loves his dog, right? Like that's understandable, right? And King kind of goes back and like Roland keeps mentioning like I have to remember he's a kid, right? Like I have to keep remembering that, and so that makes sense. A kid wanting their pet, but then that reciprocal thing of like Oi crying. Oh, that broke my heart. Like he was crying and he didn't want to leave him, like kind of like pleading with him, like, don't leave me, like what would I do without you kind of thing, And I just like went to my dog and I'm like, I love you.
Yes.
I just thought that was so sweet.
So I have a question. So Oi gets sucked into the door, but did he get sucked into the door because he jumped after them or because Ka needed him to go?
That's what I think, because
Okay.
that's what I think too, because he's meant to be with them. He's part of the ka-tet, Susannah, he would have been the only one left out, and there would have been no way for him to reconnect with them unless they came back, right? So I think he's meant to go with them, so it kind of sucked him with them. That's how I saw it.
I think that King did a good job of setting up the plan. Jake and Father Callahan are going to go out to the tower and get the tower to sign the thing, and Roland and Eddie are going to do the dangerous thing and go find Susannah, and Boy's going to save Lana. And I think the plan was they were all going to go back to the doorway cave and then use the door one more time. So their final, whatever they do. But oh yeah, they're going to come back to the Kala and move on from there onto the Dark Tower. But the fact that, so you get all this set up and you're like, okay, that's the plan. And as the reader, you're like, okay, I'm bored. I can see where this is going. And you kind of project out, oh, good, Eddie's going to finally be reunited with Susannah. He's going to save her. And then, nope, Ka has different plans, sends everybody to the different places and kind of sucks them in. So I agree with Percy that with Ka's will to put away with Jake.
Because even with Eddie being sent somewhere else, like it would have been a distraction for him to go to where Susannah is, right? That's how I see it, right? Like he would be unfocused on the mission, right? And he would just be focused on trying to get Susannah. So him being thrown into another direction, I felt like, yeah, like, again, Ka pulling the strings, like you're not meant to go there because you're gonna mess it up. Like that is not your journey right now. Like your journey is elsewhere, and I always think that's so cool.
And I think that the opposite is true. I think the opposite is true as well. That if Father Callahan had gone to see Tower, he would have been distracted with the fact that he's a character, and he would have been wanting to do that more than, hey, we need, and Calvin Tower had decided he didn't want to sell anymore. Can you see Jake and Father Callahan trying to talk him into that? So obviously, this was the way it had to happen.
Then there's the lovely timey-wimey stuff of Tower and Deep Note saving Callahan in Callahan's past.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, that's another thing. Oh, so there's so many, dark moments, that reminded me of Dark with the time travel thing, because like the tower being the Black Tower having the garden, so that Roland and Eddie succeeded in saving the rose, right? Because you find out that the garden has been saved by the ka-tet, and then that they're the ones that save Callahan in the future as well. And then it makes you wonder, if they save Callahan and they're in the real world, then is Callahan from the real world? And I think they talked at one point, they think that he crossed into this world, that he was in another one and he crossed over when he was going Toadash, when he kept going to all these different places and getting these new jobs. So now I feel like I still have to go back to the Wolves of the Kala and read his story again, because I missed something. Because it's like, how did he end up there when those were his? It's just so confusing, but in a good way.
This is the first time my brain has really started, like, real world, like the Stephen King real world, and the characters he's writing about live in this real world. At least some of the time, or some of the characters do. And this is the first time I really clued in on these.
See, and then that's awesome, because it's like you've read it before, and then you're coming back to it, and you're like, wait, were my perceptions different before? You know what I mean? Like, like the way that it just changed. I love that. Like that's how I feel every time. I know I keep talking about like Game of Thrones. Like that's how I feel every time I read Game of Thrones. Like I've read it like 3 times, right? And like every time I read it, I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Like, you know, there's more to it. And I feel like that's the feeling I'm getting with these books. Like immediately after finishing them, I'm like, I need to reread that. Like this is really cool. Like I think that's, if an author can do that, I feel like you've been really successful, you know?
All right, well, let's wrap up. We talked about a lot of things, and a lot of things we didn't get to, as with every time we have one of these shows. I think we could talk for hours, probably for the same number of hours it took to read the books. So here's the thing. March is going to be a very busy month for me. So I want to postpone our meeting an additional month. So instead of meeting for the Dark Tower series in April, we'll meet in May. And we can move that up to the middle of April or the end of April. I just need more time to read it because it's like 1,000 words. I mean, 1,000 pages. And I don't have as much reading time in March as I would normally. So right now it's scheduled for May 5th, I think. But let me know if you guys want to move it up. And so I think Brandy said she was okay with it. You guys are okay with May?
Yeah.
Okay. We're all excited to get to it. So that's why I'm saying if we all happen to read it early, we can always move the show up.
Yeah.
So
no, it's good because then I feel like I can take my time, you know, and like soak it all up because it's almost done.
I know.
Side Journeys and New Hearts in Atlantis, Insomnia, or any of those.
Yeah, you can go and do that.
There we go.
I won't even have time to read any of those extra books, but that's okay.
You may want to look up. It's 4 novellas in that collection, and only the one I'm thinking of is. I'll find the title and I'll send it to you. So you could probably get through that in very short. Unlike the other connections we've been talking about, it's Insomnia and this novella in Hearts of Atlantis. You have a direct connection, i.e.,
okay.
like Father Callaghan are going to be directly.
Yeah, I'm writing it down. I'm like, I got to look it up.
Maybe I can just do the audiobook for that on our road trip. So maybe I'll get it read that way. But
nice.
We'll try. But those of you who have joined us in the chat, I think Joseph and Brandy are the ones that are in the chat. Thank you, both of you, for joining along. And I am super excited to read the next book. But I'm even more excited. I think when we finish, Went Through the Keyhole? So we'll have that one next. I think we should go ahead and circle back and I'll read Gunslinger again and have another discussion.
I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I think we
get really drunk and watch the movie together.
Because that's the only way you can watch it, huh?
Can't make it worse.
All right, you guys. Well, then I'll see you again in May. And if I don't see you on other people's channels before then, you guys have a great weekend. Bye.
Thanks. You too.